There's a saying in Serbia, promaja ubija, which basically means the draft can kill you. Promaja, or the draft, is a really small demon that's so fast you cannot see him.
We raised 130K off of a lore book. It's not a direct challenge to WoW or like the AAA industry. It's more like a smart, lean way to do things differently.
When I went to do like a bigger project like Skyblivion and even Turtle WoW, I started working with a lot of different sections of game making.
Across 4 events, now we have conversion rate of 29.7%, still super high. So it is inspired by Balkan fantasy and culture, but still we want to keep the typical high fantasy tropes because we grew up on that.
Ćao, dobrodošli u još jednu epizodu Insert Coin podcasta, podcast u kojem pokušavamo da odgonetnemo šta je sve potrebno da se jedna video igra napravi, objavi i da postane uspešna. Pratite nas na našem YouTube kanalu, pratite nas na Instagramu, na Facebooku, na LinkedInu, na TikToku. Ako želite slušati epizode u audio formatu, to možete uraditi na Spotify-u, na platformi podcast.rs ili na bilo kom drugom mestu ili aplikaciji gdje slušate audio sadržaje. Ako želite da pomognete ovom podcastu, što bi mnogo značilo, to možete da uradite jednokratnom uplatom preko PayPala ili mesečnom pretplatom na Patreon platformi. Sa nama su tu standardno i naši partneri. Na prvom mestu Dečko Car, carski brend, ekipa braća Burazeri koji prave genijalan dizajn na majicama i na drugim stvarima, drugim artiklima garderobe, kako ja to kažem. Posjetite ih u njihovom šopu u Gračaničkoj ulici u centru grada ili u Baba Višnjinoj na Vračaru. A za sve slušalci Insert Coin podcasta, Dečko Car je obezbedio 10% popusta za prvu kupovinu na njihovom sajtu www.dečkocar.com uz promo kod InsertCoin10. Sa nama je tu i ECD, prva kriptomenjačnica u Srbiji, mesto gde možete da kupujete, prodajete i primate kripto uplate. Uz besplatan nalog na njihovom sajtu možete da otvorite svoj wallet i na taj način da kupujete kriptovaluti, da sa njima, da kažemo, trgujete. Takođe, velika stvar koju ECD nudi su kriptomati, fizička mesta na kojima možete da podignete novac u dinarima sa svog digitalnog voleta. Njih možete da nađete u galeriji i u Mercatoru u tržnim centrima u Beogradu ili u Big Fashion tržnom centru u Novom Sadu. ECD inače ima već preko nekih 65.000 korisnika, 300 biznis korisnika i preko 300.000 obavljenih transakcija preko njihovog sajta. Pogledajte sajt www.ecd.rs, a za sve pratioci Insert Coin podcasta ECD je obezbedio i paket dobrodošlice, a te detalje možete vidjeti u opisu ove epizode. To bi bilo to, a sada uživajte. Ova epizoda će biti malo drugačija u odnosu na ostale, ne po pitanju sadržaja, nego po pitanju jezika na kome pričamo. Ova epizoda će biti na engleskom jeziku cijela, a razlog za to je upravo ideja mojih gostiju današnjih da ovaj sadržaj koji budemo snimili u ovom podcastu da iskoriste i za neke marketinške svrhe za promociju svoje igre, što mislim da je odlična ideja. Tako da vidjet ćemo kako će to sve da ispadne. Imao sam epizode ranije isto na engleskom jeziku, tako da ne bi trebalo bude problem. A danas sa mnom su Borislav Vesnić i Marko Ristić iz Tricoman Studija, ekipe koja radi na igri Godforged, Origins of Ozgalor. U pitanju RPG, WoW-like, jedna na izgled možda ne toliko originalna ideja, ali originalna je način na koji oni žele to da urade. Tako da pričat ćemo o tome, pričat ćemo o inspiracijama i da vidimo dokle su došli s igrom. So, hi guys.
Hey,
hello.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, no problem. It's nice to meet you. I know you from before. So
way back.
Yeah, way back. So yeah, welcome. Thanks for coming to the podcast. Today we're going to talk about your game. So it's Godforged, Origins of Ozgalor.
Yep.
It's an RPG. So yeah. Let's start from there. What's the game and how did you get the idea and why would you like to challenge WoW as it is?
Sure. It's not a direct challenge to WoW or like the AAA industry. It's more like a smart, lean way to do things differently, which we're seeing a lot in the indie games industry with like really breakout titles coming out recently in the past few years. But, who better to kind of address that than, our creative director, Marko, who's leading the narrative and the story. And we're basing this whole IP idea and building on on something that he's been building for a few years.
Nice. Actually more than 12 years now. Like, it's something that started as an idea and a D&D campaign. Then I was like, oh, maybe I should write a short story about this. Then it went into the books, and we were like, okay, now let's make a game about it. So yeah, it has been a long road to get to this point, but it's finally starting to shape into something that I wanted it to be from the start.
Nice. So yeah, so what's the game? What's the, let's say, okay, it's not WoW competitor or challenger, but what are the basic genres of this game?
Sure. So it's an action RPG technically, but single player premium model. It's heavily narrative driven, and it's top down. It has basically a unique combination of mechanics that we believe is directed towards a particular niche within the RPG segment. And I think it has the uniqueness, to actually break out and become something special. The whole theme revolves around morality and duality of choices, kind of like in Baldur's Gate. You can go the good guy way or the bad guy way, right?
Nice.
And this is something that we really want to emphasize throughout all of our game design systems moving forward, and that's going to be the core theme and pillar of our design and structure. And basically it's going to be a combination, a blend of mechanics that speaks through that theme.
Okay, nice. So gameplay wise, I believe it's like super heavily system oriented game. Yeah. So it's like any good RPG.
Exactly.
Is there crafting in the game?
Yeah, we are definitely
okay.
thinking about adding crafting as well. I mean, we had some initial plans because a lot of it is still in pre-production, so a lot of things may change as we go through the game. But yeah, there's definitely going to be some type of crafting and like character building and all the familiar things that you see in other RPGs.
Yeah, so you have everything basically. Yeah, cool. Is there a way to like select a player character, or is it only one that you follow the story through? Or?
Yes, the story is based on a character from the lore, so you're gonna play the same character, but you're gonna have the option to customize the character to some extent, like the facial hair, and a lot of other stuff, especially like how you build the character, like the classes and all of that. But we are focusing the story, something like what The Witcher did. So you have one character and you follow his story as he goes along the lands of Ozgalor, basically.
Yeah. Nice. Okay, so what's the story world? Where does it all take place?
It all takes place on a world called Nelatar. So it's in the Godforged universe, and it's a really, really big world because the setting is set in basically the Balkan mythology. So it's not just like the South Slavic, although for the first game we plan to use South Slavic mythology. So something from let's say a pagan Serbia with a blend of a medieval Serbia. So there's a lot in there, and then we also have bits and pieces from other cultures as well. So there's a lot to explore.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, what kind of I know it's super early in the game's development, but what kind of classes can you choose basically in the game for your character? Yeah.
It starts with like the idea is to have a singular class, which is a Rune Blade, because the Rune Blade is a core class in the Ozgalor archipelago, which we use for the first game. And the idea is to allow the players to basically blend the classes into different archetypes. So it starts as, let's say, a spell blade of a sort, but you can play it in multiple ways. So you can go more a warrior route, or more a sorcerer route, or a standard Rune Blade, so whatever you want to do. But the core idea is that we have a system which allows the player to basically class blend that class options within the class, so you can create your own play style. So although it is one class, there's multiple ways, and the choices will be plenty of how you want to build your character.
Yeah, okay, great. So yeah, that's on the part of player character, but how about the enemies and the NPCs? Is it like WoW style, like orcs and elves and humans, or there's something
we want to keep the high fantasy trope. So it is inspired by Balkan fantasy and culture, but still we want to keep the typical high fantasy tropes, because we kind of grew up on that through modding communities, through the games that we played. We really wanted to keep that typical fantasy setting, because what we've seen so far is that, you know, even in The Witcher, that has amazing Slavic mythology embedded in it, they don't start off with the heavy stuff right away. So you need something familiar. You need like a griffin, you need something along those lines that will get you immersed and make you want to dive deeper into the story. So basically it's intended for, like, you know, for newcomers and veterans alike. So we want to keep that baseline that is, you know, 60-70% of something familiar, and then bring like 30-ish% of some new flavor to it with the Balkan high fantasy mythology blend, right?
Nice. Okay. At this point, do you have any idea how long the game will be?
Yeah,
I mean,
like the general idea is to have around 20 hours of main storyline, and that's going to expand to around 40-50 hours of like branching narratives, side quests. Yeah, the general idea is to be replayable, not to an insane amount, but basically we want people to have at least 2 to 3 different playthroughs and endings that are gonna feel different, and potentially once we get to the section when we're doing the second or the third game, we want to transfer our decisions throughout the franchise, basically, like, you know, Mass Effect or Dragon Age. Yeah.
Nice. So one of the interesting things that you mentioned while we were talking before the recording of this episode was like you're trying to nitpick some, you know, local folklore stuff in the game, and then came up the story about the draft, which is so prominent in our country and the region. So please tell me a little bit about that, because it's super interesting, and you just didn't want to spill everything. So I'm just quite interested about that.
Yeah, so one of the like known thing about Serbian people is that we are a really superstitious people. So there's a lot, especially like in history, there's a lot that we basically invented. So there's a lot of folklore around multiple things, like especially draft. So there's a saying in Serbia, promaja ubija, which basically means the draft can kill you. So the idea is, one of the folklore, basically they were telling their children that promaja, or the draft, is actually a really small demon that's so fast you cannot see him. So every time he goes by, he takes a part of your soul. So slowly he kills you. And that's one of the things that we were like amazed, like how many similar things there are in our actual folklore and our myths that no one talks about, and it's not presented in any type of medium like movies or games. And that's something that we want to use and like share that piece of culture with the rest of the world, basically.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, and there's also an interesting trope that we're trying to kind of dissect, and this is like, okay, we have medieval Byzantine Empire in a high fantasy world. And then you have like pagan Slavic tribes, which were kind of indigenous to the area. And the cultural and folklore differences and the derivatives between the two cultures who have been separated throughout centuries and now are starting to discover how they might be alike in the face of a world threat. So that's also something that's really interesting that we're exploring.
Yeah, nice. So yeah, how the entire idea came up? Okay, I understand that you started brewing this story long ago, but okay, when did you decide that you want to go from written fiction into video game?
Yeah, so for me, it all started basically with writing and modding of the games. So I always liked to write fan fiction, and I was amazed by like what Blizzard did with World of Warcraft or Bethesda with Elder Scrolls. And I always wanted to like change small things, like let's say making Arthas actually be a good guy and he stays in Lordaeron and saves his people. But that led me to modding. And I started as a competitive player, so I was playing Warcraft 3 on like small local competitions here in Serbia, but there were also some like online, if you can call it online, organizations that were trying to do those, and I was really vocal. Like if I noticed something that didn't work in a map, I would go to devs and I would like write a really mean message, oh, you didn't balance this good. And so at that time, a lot of people were starting to create like custom maps, like Dota and those like commonly known maps. But there was also like a map called Azeroth Wars, which was really amazing because Warcraft 3 was an RTS, a real-time strategy game, and Azeroth Wars was basically a grand strategy map within Warcraft 3. And I was like, my whole world changed. I was like, ooh, I can pick a race, there are events, lore things, and all of that. And I was like, cool, I want to play this. But there were a lot of balance issues because as a competitive player, I started noticing like, oh, this faction is too strong. If you play this, you are always going to win. So I went to tell the devs like, oh, you did this wrong. Like, you need to balance this out. And they were like, cool, you know about this stuff, want to join us? And I was like, okay, that's something that I can do. So I unintentionally went into modding. I was not even aware that I was doing the modding at the time. And they were like, cool, you know this? How about you do some level design? So notice the patterns where the characters are getting stuck and stuff like that, change it, but make sure that it fits the lore. So I started modding basically without even knowing that I was modding. And that's how everything went from basically from there to like going to do a lot bigger projects.
Yeah, nice. But yeah, when did you realize that all of this? Okay, so you wrote some stuff, you were modding, but at what point did you decide I want to make my own stuff?
Yeah.
How that, because it's a huge decision. It's not like, okay, I'm gonna make a video game. You know how tough that is. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, a lot of things I think needed to align for that to happen. I think at the time I was running Crazy Labs Hub's accelerator in Novi Sad, and basically his former teammates who he was with in Nordius Hub before that were already doing some initial world building setups and assets for Origins of Ozgalor. And then they came to me and in Crazy Hubs, and they wanted to make mobile games because they wanted something quick and profitable. And at the time, the accelerator was offering, you know, a good onboarding experience with, you know, a mobile publisher connected to the story. It was well paid. So basically, they stepped in and they basically aced the accelerator program, and by fourth cohort of the accelerator, they become basically a mentor team for all of the others. And we became really close friends. And that's when, since there's not a lot, a narrative designer can do in hyper casual and casual games, I spend a lot of time, with Marko, aside from playing competitive Mortal Kombat, he brought me into this world that he was building for 12 years at the time. And we were all looking for a transition into PC and console. And after COVID, when everything in the market and mobile market was kind of crashing and falling apart, and the momentum was basically dwindling, we wanted to switch back to their original project. And at the time, I stepped in as business capacity as the CEO to run the studio. And to help them, organize better, because that's something that they were lacking as a dev team. And, coming from 10 years of experience in hustling with indie backgrounds, working with publishers and mobile and such, I brought what was necessary to kind of make the studio stronger in a sense. And it came naturally because we were already building like 40 prototypes for mobile games at the time together. And then we switched when Crazy Labs Hubs was shutting down. We switched from that to straight on to Rising Starts Accelerator, which funded our initial effort to register the company and move forward. And then soon after, with just the lore guide that Marko had, we got angel investors from modding communities to back us up, and they invested in the next portion of the money that basically brought us where we are right now with the initial technical build and prototype testing stuff. Still not at vertical slice stage, but this kind of formatted our uncanny approach because we wanted to test from the get-go. So we didn't do a lot of gray boxing prototypes. We wanted to go full graphic mode straight away, because we know that was our strong suit, and we know that we wanted to test our hypothesis in the modding communities that were already available to us through Marko's network. So we wanted, hands down, to test the game design, to get early feedback so that even a technical prototype stage, we could secure some data that would allow us to basically get traction that would be enough for investors, if not publishers, to come in early on. So that's kind of like an unclassic approach that I think we had compared to a lot of indies, because the project scope is big, right? And it's just the four of us. So, and we were working on technical prototype for about a year. So when you take a look at that, what we've actually achieved to have a playable is pretty amazing. And then we've went to all the major Steam events, festivals. We showcased our tech demo at Gamescom last year. And we were super...
The Gamescom in Germany?
Gamescom in Germany, not Gamescon in Belgrade, yeah. So, and we got 52% conversion rate from visits to wish lists on Steam. And we were like, wait, is this data actually correct? Because we know that the standard for such events is like, I don't know, between 10 and 15% conversion. And we were like, 52 is a big outlying number. Like maybe it's a fluke.
It's huge.
Maybe it's a fluke. Say 7 times the industry standard. And we were like, let's test this on multiple Steam events. Then we went to like DevGam's Steam event, DevPlay, to Digital Dragon's Steam event. And across 4 events, now we have compiled like a conversion rate of 29.7%. Still super high. Even though this is all small scale testing, I think it proves that, you know, there's validity in the idea, because people haven't tested the game. They only see a half-pledged Steam page out there, and they're like, you know, reacting to it pretty well. So I think that, you know, it made sense for us. We'll see. In the end, if we manage to raise an investment, then that will be a final confirmation that it actually worked. But I think, you know, as a methodology, we couldn't have done anything else that would get us to that point of having a vertical slice, basically.
Yeah. Well, building a vertical slice is practically the entire game.
Yeah.
Just super small scope, nano scope, but you have to have everything there, and that's a huge undertaking, and it costs a lot, and it takes time.
Yep.
But it's a validation, and it is a proof that the idea works or doesn't. And yeah, you can secure more funds with it, but it just takes time. So, okay, I believe you're on the right path. I saw the Steam page. I saw the playable tech demo, not the playable, but the gameplay tech demo. Yeah, there's art. It's not a gray box, so that means a lot. You have nice art, and I mean, all boxes ticked for the start. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's some 30 to 45 minutes of content, and a lot of the systems are now placeholders. So now we went dark, and now we're building backend. We need to make this thing scalable at this stage. Like with this demo, we have sort of proven a point. We have reached a stage where now we need to actually build systems, not to fall back further in production, right? Yeah. So a lot of the systems are now being worked on, and processes are being worked on in the background. We've set up something somewhat of an unconventional path to fundraising for, as at least I think, indie studios in Serbia. We're going the equity route. We want to work with angel investors, and we want to work with equity investors at the early stage. And so Catapult Accelerator here in Serbia was one big leap for us, because we had a lot of market research. We had a lot of market data. We had systems and processes, but it was somewhat scattered and not properly conveyed in a form and structure that can be clearly communicated to investors. And I think just working with mentors at Catapult who are VCs, who are angel investors, to get inside of their mind and to learn their perspective of how they think and what they need, and how, you know, financial models work for them and what makes sense, I think was a pretty big game changer in making, you know, the studio investor ready. But, you know, like there was a crypto winter, right? People say that now it's a game funding winter of a sort. But I think, you know, that the opportunity within the niche that we're chasing, which is this kind of AAA, AA, if you will, is definitely there with, you know, a lot of outliers in the market and not a lot of projects within that particular niche. So you're not competing with, you know, thousands of RPGs that go on Steam, but you're actually competing with a very small segment when you're on a level that, you know, your full budget is, you know, 5 mil.
Yeah.
Right. We still need to get there, but that's the general idea. You need to have it laid out.
That's the idea. That's the project and budget scope. At this point, it's 4 of us or 4 of you.
Yeah.
Right. And the scaling of the size of the studio as you go into full production, when you secure the funding, at what number of people do you think you'll need to deliver on the promise?
So basically, we already you know, scaled for the demo a bit. So we have a pretty strong basis of co-development partners for sound design, for voice acting, for original compositions, for marketing especially, and you know, studios that have been helping us with assets, with animations, with, you know, all the stuff. So we're not going into scaling blindly. And I think, you know, now in Serbia here, we're in a unique position to kind of absorb senior talent, you know, that is or was working in Ubisoft, in Wargaming, in Epic Games, in, you know, a lot of companies that I don't think have an opportunity to work on an RPG of this type and scale potentially within our ecosystem. I might be wrong. There are a few that I know that are working on some similar stuff.
Yeah, but not the big studios.
Yeah,
but not the big
studios. So we already saw a lot of people wanting to commit their time outside of their job to basically just be a part of the project. So we had a lot of pro bono contributors, voice actors, artists that wanted to jump on the project, just be part of it, so that when we actually scale, we can hire them full time, right? So a lot of that setup is already there. I think, you know, for this sort of project, you know, for vertical slice stage, we would need to scale to up to around 20 people. And then potentially when content scaling comes, double that size. But with keeping it really smart and lean in a way, because our structure is such that we're 4 co-founders. So, and each is in charge of their own verticals. So I'm in charge of biz dev, Marko in charge of narrative. We have 2 Lucas in charge of tech and art production. So we are really trying to keep lean and avoid, you know, the major problem in our old big scope RPGs, which is scope creep, right?
Yeah,
you want to put all of these features, you want to expand the world, we really want to keep a tight grip on all of that through our processes. So now we're taking the time to really fine tune them and to create a structure for, you know, onboarding people that is going to, you know, mitigate that risk already going into scaling the team at this stage, right?
Yeah, I mean it's a
hell of a task, man.
Yeah, exactly.
But somebody's got to do it.
It's an endeavor, man. Yeah, kudos. Really, it's a grand vision.
Yeah,
and grand undertaking. First step: vertical slice and funds. So. In terms of the scope and everything, do you have any approximate idea how long could it take to actually go to V1.0?
Yeah, basically, I think once we...
I mean, this is it's a huge asterisk on the side. You know, no commitments.
No commitments.
I understand that.
The general idea, you know, after we finish the vertical slice, when we raise this round, it's going to take about a year to complete that. After that, we're going to move into content scaling and hopefully get early access done by late 2028. And then late 2029 should be the full release. So at least that's the general outline that we have right now, depending on how funding rounds go, depending on, a lot of production stuff, million factors. But that's the general idea.
Iako vrednost Bitcoina konstantno raste, i dalje nije kasno da uđete u svet kripta. Potrebno je samo da napravite prvi korak. A uz ECD, prvu i najveću kriptomenjačnicu u Srbiji, taj korak je brz, lak i siguran. Već 13 godina su na tržištu, koristi ih preko 65.000 ljudi, 300 biznis korisnika i imaju više od 300.000 realizovanih transakcija. Lično sam isprobao razne servise, ali ECD se ispostavio kao najjednostavniji za korišćenje. Registracija je laka, sve funkcioniše bez problema, a imaju i mobilnu aplikaciju da brzo pristupim svom walletu. Pored toga, ECD ima i svoje kriptomate za podizanje gotovine direktno sa vašeg kripto voleta. U Beogradu kriptomati su postavljeni u tržnim centrima Mercator i Galerija, a u Novom Sadu kriptomat se nalazi u Big Fashion tržnom centru. Ako mislite da ste spremni da napravite korak ka kripto svetu, besplatno se registrujte na njihovom sajtu ecd.rs i aktivirajte svoj kripto wallet. A za sve slušaoci Insert Coina, ECD je obezbedio poklon dobrodošlice u iznosu od 500 dinara za sve koji se registruju putem promo linka u opisu ove epizode. With that in mind, now you're at what stage, so you're preparing to get some money?
Yeah, it's pre-production, and in startup terms, it's a pre-seed round, right? So in the pre-seed round, we're raising to complete the vertical slice with, the data and validation that we got so far. And then after that, it's either going with the publishing deal or getting basically a seed round of investment to complete the project, right? Depending on, the kind of deals that are available at the time. But, what we're trying to do is build, IP value for the long term. So I know it's something that you can't plan franchise from the get-go unless you have like crazy success. But it makes sense to lay out, some of the key guidelines that are going to help you act in the moment if success happens. So this is something that we've been really diligent on, building these processes, clear ideas of how to go transmedia, of when to expand into what medium, whether it's, animated film, whether it's books, whether it's merchandising,
a mobile game,
whatever it may be. We're setting up, that legal structure, and we're setting up those plans. So, if the time comes, we can execute and expand on already existing structure, right?
Yeah. So at this point, you basically can also not plan, but have an idea for, so Godforged, the origins of Ozgalor is one whole piece of the story, but I believe that the world is much larger than that, and many characters, many stories that can be told in the world. So in that sense, you can probably outline or just have like inkling of an idea for the next, 5 games.
Yeah, definitely.
Whether in the same genre or a little outing into a smaller game in another genre or whatever. So,
the world is really big. So we only took a small chunk of it to make the first game in. It's not just a tool to make the game making easier for us. It's also to have an easier introduction for the players. Because if we put them into the main storyline from the books and the narrative, it's going to be really hard for them to understand the factions, the races, and everything that comes with it. So the idea was to take just a small part of it and make it basically an introduction to the wide world. So the idea is to continue the story after that. Like we introduce the players to the whole world, to the major factions and the major characters, and then continue from that, because there's a lot that we can go deeper into. And that was also one of the biggest challenges for us, because although it seems easy to basically use an existing lore and just like, oh, you have the lore ready, you can just make a story about it and add some dialogues and that's gonna be it. Usually it's not like that, because the main difference between the books and the games is actually that games require a lot of talent and a lot of people to work on it. So you don't have just a writer making everything on their own. Now you have the game designers, level designers, and a lot of other people that basically need to work in unison to create something. So bending that story to fit the game itself is hard but really satisfying job, because you can actually see things come to life. Because in the books, it all works on your imagination. You have to imagine the scenes, the characters, and all of that. But when you have a character designer and he finally makes something that you imagined for so long, it fills you with like, ooh, what's next? I want to make more. And that also comes back to like Boris' story about scope creep, because it's really easy to get lost into the world, like, oh, let's add all of the races in the first game, which is impossible, because if you even just make like elves, dwarves, and humans, you have a lot of job, like a lot of animations, rigging, and basically making like new models, cities, and all of it. It's a huge job. So we had to basically pick, okay, for the first game, who are the main races that we need to introduce, and who are the main characters that we need to introduce to start this whole journey that the players will go through, basically.
Yeah, I mean, with that kind of world building and all that you can have, I mean, come on, how can you choose?
Yeah, exactly.
which part of it to work on? Yeah,
Yeah.
as the first one. It's
Exactly.
like, yeah.
And I think it really interesting, you know, something that I think Marko did very smartly in designing his world, he kept the design open to additions. So think of Star Wars world, right? It's ever expanding. You can basically do what it's not locked in within its borders, and it's not finite in the way that it's constructed. So moving forward, even if you kind of deplete the materials that you have, it's set up in a way that you can always build on top of it. And I think that's crucial when you're trying to build that, you know, for the long term, and especially, you know, him as a writer, going into books and expanding it, like, yeah.
Yeah, of course. And also one huge difference between books and the games. In book, you set the pacing of the story, and you cannot do anything about it as a reader. But as a player, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, exactly.
You cannot. You don't have to follow the game's game design. You can just, I don't know, farm and do nothing else in the game, or you can do everything.
Yeah, and especially I learned that the hard way. So going back to the modding backstory, so I went from like strategy games, then they recommended me to another strategy project called the Tamriel Total War. So this time in Elder Scrolls universe, and that was the first time that I was given a job to do something about the narrative. Because they also made a grand strategy game using like Medieval 2 Total War, Medieval 2, sorry, Total War, basically used their engine to create Tamriel, a world of Elder Scrolls for that game. And they were like, okay, we have a big world, we need to cover events, like we need someone to do lore checks for what we're doing. And because in Warcraft you have a PvP and it's a multiplayer thing, people don't notice that as much, but here it was a single player experience. So players that went into that world, they were like, oh, I came here for immersion. So that's how I slowly shifted towards the narrative. And later on, when I went to do like a bigger project like Skyblivion and even Turtle WoW, I started working with a lot of different sections of game making. And I was like, I still had that mindset, no, I'm just going to write the story. It's going to be cool. All I have to do is create cool characters and everyone is going to love them. But then you have to keep everything neat and clean, because players notice stuff that you don't, and they're always gonna try to do something that you don't expect. So if you're like, oh, this is the way toward the main quest, and they're like, cool, I'm gonna check that out later, but what's behind me? So you always have to think like from the game design perspective, what can they do and what can they break? So something like I don't want to call them like a small children, but they like to test everything, and usually you have to fix it really quick, because if they find something and it's game breaking, if it's there for too long, they're gonna lose interest, because oh, they don't even notice this. How can they do something bigger? And on Skyblivion, that
everything.
Was it was huge. Like for Skyblivion, the team was really big. By the time I went there, they were still growing. They were not as big as they are today, but there was still a lot to do. And that was the first time that I was introduced to limitations, because before that I was like, oh, I have the whole world for me to do, but they were like, no, you cannot do anything, because they were making Oblivion in Skyrim engine, and they were like, it still needs to feel like Oblivion. You cannot change anything. You need to keep it as close as you can to the original, but you have some permissions to enhance it in some way. So you had to check the lore. Like then I was like, okay, this looks all good, but the environment design was not good because it didn't represent what it did in the older game. So there was a lot to think about. And when you enter such a large production and then you have more experienced people than you, it helps a lot to go for the help, because honestly, I had an ego problem because my writing was good, but aside from the writing, I didn't know anything about making a game. So I was like, oh, I know everything. I can do everything myself. And then you start working on a really big project like Skyblivion, and you're like, damn, I don't know nothing. And then you're like, who can I ask? And at first you're really shy because you're like, oh, I don't want to tell people that I don't know anything because they're going to take it against me and stuff like that. But no, in reality, everyone is happy to help and everyone wants to help because you're all working for the same goal of creating a game that you all want to play. Yeah. And that's basically how I was like transitioning from a writer going into like narrative design and game making, because it's a lot different from the books.
Yeah, this definitely, because with a book, for me, writing a book is a blessing and a curse because there are no limitations.
Yeah.
And only limitations are set by you and people who are creative, who want to write something, they want to write everything all at once. And it's not a viable way to go about it. So, yeah, writing a book is really hard, but not as near as making video games. So,
yeah, because for the books, it's all about the story. So if you can tell a good story, it's gonna be good. But with the game, it's completely different because now you have so many different personas of gamers, and you have to try to satisfy the biggest amount of them, basically, because let's be real, you cannot satisfy every player in the world. So there's always going to be someone, that's going to be like, oh, I don't like this. Yeah. But as long as you make the majority happy, I think you can consider it a successful game or a successful design. And then you have to like go into their shoes basically and think like, is this going to be fun to play? Because especially for like a narrative design, you know the full picture. You know what's going to come at the end, at the middle of the story, and you're like, oh, this makes sense. But then if someone plays it for the first time without all of that knowledge, they're like, oh, this is confusing. So you always have to think like, how is someone who doesn't know anything about the game going to perceive this game compared to us developers that are like going a lot further?
Yeah, because you need to roll out the story in phases or whatever. Yeah.
No, I was going to say that it brings a really relevant experience in terms of connections that it opens up. The developers that you work with on those projects are powerhouses, and I think it opens eventually a lot of doors that you need when you're starting your own studio. So I think, a lot of that has helped us to do our early stage iterations where we had, people on calls from Bethesda and, people who worked on, on UX of Valorant or Horizon Zero Dawn. Like we have a pretty strong advisory board that we've compiled over time. And these are like some AAA veterans, right? Like former THQ, Gameforge. Then we have, Jason Schklar from UX is Fine, who worked on Valorant and Horizon Zero Dawn, making sure that, the UX of the game feels really compelling and modern, but, also catering to the old school nostalgic audience. And it's like there are a lot of these elements that, we wouldn't have been thinking as indie developers moving into a game, but then they just bring up these little things like, hey, have you thought about, how this is going to pan out? And then you basically had to go back and rethink a lot of stuff. And that's been immensely helpful for us,
Yeah. Well, that's, I don't know what to say about it. I mean, really, that having such, heavyweights in your corner is really
and they're sticking around.
Yeah,
they're here.
They like the project.
They're officially on. Some of them are on our advisory board, and we're closing contracts with them. They want, they're going to be included into our, equity pool when we raised a round, and they really brought a ton of industry context with them. So now we're basically finding ourselves, you know, starting to mingle in circles that we wouldn't have thought possible. And that's, you know, very, very eye-opening to see how everyone is just chilled, which is, you know, the general, you know, how it should be in the gaming industry. You always think like these big shots that are working on these big games, you can't imagine like how they function day to day. And then there they are, you know, in flesh and blood, talking to you, giving you advice on how you should approach certain things. And yeah, it's an experience. And I think even from a year ago when we started, our team is not nearly the same as we were when we began, right? And I think that just speaks volumes. And that's the growth, you know. Can't imagine how much it's going to be by the time we finish the first game.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. So, okay, regarding so it's 4 of you founders. You said your roles, and do you, I mean, is it work from home or do you have an
right
office?
Now,
It's
okay.
from home.
Right now from home. We're trying to avoid, you know, any unnecessary burn rate. But basically,
and waste of time.
And waste
commuting.
of time of commuting as well. And we're half based in Novi Sad and half in Belgrade. So it's a mix, like 2 of us are in Novi Sad and then the 2 of Lucas are in Belgrade. But yeah, definitely I think we see value in working in an office. Once we raised around and once we, you know, start scaling the team, and, you know, operations is something that's not foreign to me. I've ran, you know, Thorium games some 10 years ago here, where I had like 20-ish people in the studio. Then I had an accelerator where I had, you know, 10 small studios of 2 to 3 people per studio. So again, 25 people that I manage. So I think, you know, in an operational sense, I have a lot of that experience that's going to make, you know, our life much easier when we actually get into it and scale. And I think when you're hands-on and you're in person with people solving problems on a daily basis, it grows the team immensely faster and problems get solved a lot quicker. So yeah, we're probably going to do some hybrid type of setup, but we're going to do, you know, live development as much as we can.
Yeah. So who's gonna move? You to Belgrade or the Lucas to Novi Sad?
We're thinking like New Belgrade is kind of a central point because, you know,
you can say
the
that,
fast train from Novi Sad coming in like in half an hour, and then it takes people in Belgrade a longer time to come to New Belgrade than it takes us from Novi Sad to come to New Belgrade.
That's true.
There's also that factor, so we're kind of finding common ground.
Well,
I also have to mention, like, when we're talking about the team, one of our greatest strengths is basically having the 4 founders, each covering a vertical, because what we noticed in a lot of indies is, in an indie, you have to wear multiple hats. It's always the case. You don't have like we have a business guy, a marketing guy, or a game developer, and he's solely a game developer. All of us are doing multiple things. And what allowed us to basically get to this point is having 2 Lucas doing the development. So the development isn't slowing down because we have people working on it, while Bora and me focused more on the business and like creating all of that data for the investors. So I just had to give a shout out to our people because they did an amazing job. Just 2 of them created the technical demo, which is a really, really big achievement. And sometimes it's really hard, like, for developers to see something progressing because they're in the trenches. They're doing the game and that's all they see. And in their mind, there's like, oh, there's a really big road that we yet have to go. And they don't see everything that's happening on the business side as often as we do. And it's really good, like, when you reach certain milestones to showcase that to the whole team. And that's one of the reasons why we are thinking of doing like a hybrid model of like being in person there, because there's something to that personal connection when you're working in the same room with someone, and how that affects like the team morale, because then you can quickly showcase, oh, look, something good happened on this front, and they're like, oh, we need help on this front, and it just makes things a lot easier compared to like Discord, where you send a message, did he see the message, is he muted, or something like that. So definitely there are some good things in like working in person, but on the other hand, it's not that cheap.
Yeah, well, the productivity is much higher when you work from home or from your office or whatever, no, not the studio,
Yeah.
because there are no distractions. If
Oh,
you
yeah,
if you
definitely.
have your
Yeah.
shit together, to say, there are no distractions. And when you work as a team somewhere, you go to for a coffee, for a lunch,
Yeah.
for a walk, for a cigarette,
Yeah.
whatever, you know. So
Yeah,
it's a nice thing to do, and it should be done because it's basically real-time team building.
Yeah, exactly.
But when you go home and work from home, then you're like
Yeah.
super
But
focused
it's
on
also
the
it's a
stuff, you know.
double-edged sword basically, because when you're there in the person, like even if someone was like, for example, a programmer, maybe he will have some idea that
Yeah.
you won't implement fully, but the general direction that he went with is like, oh, why didn't I think about that? Because, for example, when you're in the narrative design, you're constantly thinking about narrative design, and you start to make a box and you forget to think out of it, basically. And then he's like, oh, what about this? And you're like, God damn it.
Yeah.
Why didn't I think about this? So there's some good stuff when you're like working in person. But as you mentioned, like especially for the writers, we had that big problem when I worked in other studios and on other projects. When you mix, for example, like the programmers and game designers with writers and narrative designers, because as a writer, you need peace and quiet. So you have to focus on the story, on in the immersion, and then you have some designer screaming in the background because something isn't working. So there's definitely like, it's a double-edged sword. So if you're working in person, it's good to have offices. But on the other hand, having multiple offices is not too cheap.
Yeah, it's it's a balance of the two. So, you know, you want to really kind of leverage the time that you're spending in person with people to create cohesion, to, you know, devote yourself to creative problem solving, to things that matter to the studio as a group and to the project. And then when you are alone, you really want to crunch on your tasks. And so it's basically why hybrid model, I think, works really well.
Yeah. And it's the nice way that it works, exactly as you said. So yeah, I experienced that as well, working well post-COVID anywhere. So yeah, it's a nice thing to do. So at this point, you are basically for Riders of the Apocalypse, looking for funding, finishing the vertical slice. What's the next step?
The next step
Money?
is to open up, and that is basically to open up as many contacts, conversations, and doors as possible. Because I think that at this stage, you don't, when the funding landscape is uncertain, and there's a lot of turbulence in the market, like there are some signs that it's starting to rejuvenate slowly. But you need to look in unconventional places, right? So we're not only looking at gaming investors, we're looking at non-gaming investors. You see a lot of cases where, you know, IT companies or, you know, some small app or anybody.
A dentist.
A dentist company,
basically.
agricultural conglomerate
Whoever,
or whoever, you know, has some passion for gaming and has all of this money and wants to enter like a VC group that is basically vertical agnostic. So they don't care in what they invest in as long as there's passion, they like the team and it makes sense and it's a vertical they would like to explore. They need to put their money to work. So we're seeing a lot of that. So that taught us of how to filter different kinds of, you know, pitch decks, different kinds of information sets that we present to people who are not from gaming and who are from gaming, because it's easy to, you know, start talking about common tropes, about game design, about
game lingo,
about
basically.
lingo and benchmarks of projects and what mechanics they have, and that's not what VCs are about. Right? They want to know, like, hey, what's the potential? What's the market size? What is my exit strategy going to look like, you know, within the next 7 to 9 years? Because if it's, you know, an institutional investor, they have their LPs who they're answering to, and then they need to know when the turnover is going to happen and what's the potential, right? Same as, you know, angel investors, they're investing their own money. They want to see the potential exit and how fast the revenue is going to come in. Like, they go into due diligence on a lot of things. And this is something that, you know, I already mentioned Catapult prepared us really well. Like the concept of just having a data room, for instance, which was new to me. Yeah, data room. So data room is really a conventional thing in the startup world that, you know, people who are creating innovative solutions and solving concrete problems with their tech and apps need to have when they're fundraising. And it's basically a set of documentation like, okay, investor deck, investor memo, executive summary, the market analysis, go-to-market strategy, your traction documents, legal setup, patents that you have set up, whatever it may be. It needs to be set up in a accessible room, like online. There are tools that people use for that right now, so you can actually check, you know, what the investors are looking at in your data room, so you can prepare for your next meeting and think, you know, okay, maybe they're exploring something within this section, and then I can kind of look into it deeper and prepare some additional materials. And like, you really need to build that communication funnel clearly and actively, right? So that's something that we've been learning that, you know, we're still exploring. And I see that a lot of, for instance, gaming investors are surprised by this. They're like, hey, I don't usually see gaming startups having this type of structure, like a classic startup investor approach. And I think that somewhat that's our defining feature moving into this, because, you know, we tested really early pre-vertical slice. We want to go the equity route. We've structured all this data, and now we're, you know, trying to see how that communication works. So yeah, it's really been an interesting experience, if I might say myself.
Nice. Yeah, well, it's a huge green flag. It's not a red flag, yeah. So yeah, you have that going for you, but basically all that came from Catapult program, working with mentors, getting knowledgeable about this stuff, and preparing all the documentation.
Exactly,
yourselves.
It was like straight 3 months of grinding of data that we had, putting it into actionable documents and forms that, you know, speak our story clearly. And now that we're actually communicating, we can, you know, grant access to people to certain sections that they want to see. We can start conversations. Like, usually people pitch their project, and the investor is like, yeah, I like this. What's the next step? And then people freeze. Like, what is the next step? How do I, isn't he supposed to offer me a contract of some sort? Like,
or a next step.
How does that go? Like, maybe he wants to see more, but what does he want to see? Right? So this is, it's basically grinding out those nitty-gritty details and following up with actionable structure. Like, hey, okay, now we open up access here for you to continue the conversation. And that's been an eye-opener for us, you know? So, yeah.
Yeah, it's like you have a great car that goes so fast, and you're driving towards the cliff, and you don't have your steering wheel working. So what now? Yeah, so yeah,
exactly, and it is fast paced.
You find yourself not being able to steer.
Yeah,
yeah,
and runways are short. You have all of these deadlines. You need to think of the product. You need to think of the validation that you're getting, and then you need to talk to investors in different ways, right? It's like you need to have multiple versions of your verbal decks, of your standalone decks for gaming investors, non-gaming investors, extended versions and variations. And it's a process that you constantly update, because as new information comes in and you get, you know, more traction, of course you're going to update all of those. So it's like if doing a full sweep of everything pretty much constantly. That's why, you know, indies face problems, because they don't have a lot of times they don't have a dedicated biz dev. And usually a developer or a producer or an audio guy or whoever comes in and wants to do like operations, bureaucratic stuff, legal stuff, accounting, investor stuff, and that's
Too much.
these are all
It's just
full-time
too much.
jobs, and
Yeah.
then he's not involved in development at all, right? So this is one of the advantages that we have, I think, with me being, you know, full throttle on biz dev and partnerships and investment and studio structure, whereas, you know, I can let my devs be creative and do what they do best, make the game fun, you know.
Yeah, perfect. So at this point, as a biz dev, your task is to do all of those things. Do not overlap with the other guys, which is great, and that's like super dedicated roles that you have. But now with the looking for an investment, so that's a pretty hot topic, has been, will be forever for indies, how to get money. So I don't want to ask you how to get money, but what's the business side of deciding which route to go? Is it a publisher good route, or VC, or angel investor, gaming VC, non-gaming VC? You mentioned all of those, but for me it's like my logic, and you can prove me wrong, and I would like you to do so, is like, why would I go with a VC who doesn't know anything about video games? I'd rather go with a publisher who knows how to publish a game.
Yeah.
Has the experience, has the data, has the people, did it on multiple occasions with previous games and stuff like that, instead of VC who just gives me the money and doesn't give me this go-to-market know-how.
True.
So what's the reasoning behind that, behind deciding?
So for us personally, I think first having that modding background and access to a really vast Discord community where we can test and build our early adopter structure. Then having a partnership with a guy, you know, who single-handedly did Reddit campaigns and growth hacked around, you know, 2 million copies for a single RPG that brought revenue about 30 million to a studio. Not going to mention which one.
Of course.
But having that guy and testing our design hypothesis at this stage is proving to be really valid in combination with our modding communities that we have access to. And then there's also a new trend in publishing called shadow publishing, right?
Yep.
You have, for instance, Not a Shark Company. You had Dino here on your podcast, and we've been working with him and with Julien Ramet from France. We're setting up, you know, a structure that is basically going to help us self-publish the game by allowing, you know, internal community building and growth hacking to take place with our already established partner, leveraging modding communities, leveraging macro streamers that we already have access to. So not going to mention which ones, but when they stream it, I think, you know, everybody within the RPG community is going to, you know, figure out which one it is. But we need at least, you know, a playable vertical slice to start talking with them. But they're already interested. They want to play the game on their channels. And this is something that, you know, we have prepared. So I don't think that there is a lot of value in having a classic publisher deal, right? But then again, there are a lot of publishers who are now figuring out and changing their ways, giving contracts that are not as potentially as predatory for indie developers, like, you know, what Kepler did for Claire in Expedition 33, like really lean budget, really lean marketing strategy, really tight niche within the RPG space, and also an amazing game. And I think that, you know, that's the strategy moving forward for us, definitely, because I think that, you know, we have the means to execute it, and we're not going to go like have you know, physical copies at this stage, at least. So yeah, the traditional models are changing, I believe, and I think we're going to adapt. We're not opposed to working with with any publisher for that matter, you know. But it has to make sense for the VCs and angels that enter early stage and help us develop the vertical slice. So we would need to really define, you know, clear conditions that would be beneficial for all parties involved, right? And I think that there are people who are willing to step up and do that. And we're starting some conversations now, but, you know, you can't really strike a deal, I think, such a, let's say, big scope deal with the publisher when you don't have a vertical slice yet with the technical build. And, you know, that's something that we've been trying to bridge by approaching angels and VCs locally, by getting on all of these grants and support programs, applying anywhere we can, so we can basically de-risk those investments and de-risk those decisions down the road. And I think that's a valid path, not just for us, but for a lot of indie studios. You should do all the groundwork that, you know, de-risks future investment. And if there are grants out there, go get them. Get somebody who can write projects. Go on those programs. The context that you make there and the experiences that you get in terms of running a business can be really invaluable to you. And you're going to have a lot of runway, so you can actually do your stuff full-time. You don't have to part-time it anymore. But, you know, if you're an indie, like, if you're having a job, or if you're a student and you're building your game on the side, or if you're a solo developer, then, you know, maybe you don't need it, or maybe you do, because it's going to allow you to actually complete the game with that funding. You know, for us, that's impossible. It can only de-risk something early stage, but for smaller projects, it can be a make it or break it moment, right?
Yeah. That's, when we were talking about before starting the recording, so in the off, I was like probing you for like, dude, what are you doing, man? Making that huge of a game? That's insane. But slowly, as you were like answering my doubts and questions and stuff like that, I was beginning to see that although this is the first game of your studio as it is, and it is a huge undertaking, a huge scope of the game, with all the connections, with all the knowledge that you bring, each of you, and all the knowledge that you get through all the programs and stuff like that, and the modding community and the advisors and everything, I was like, okay, maybe this makes sense in the end. So a nice story, really nice story. A novel approach to say, at least from my standpoint, because I talk to a lot of people about game development and stuff, and this kind of businessy approach to this is a fresh thing to see.
Yeah, I mean, you can't lightly compare yourself to the outliers, you know, to the Claire's, to the PAL Worlds, to, you know. But there is a clear pattern and a model behind the way that those games are marketed. Of course, that, you know, the game itself has to be good. Yeah. And those games are amazing.
The bare minimum.
The bare minimum, right? And then once you strike that viral chord, and you know the niche really well that you're aiming for, a lot of things unravel by themselves. You know, not happen by themselves, but unravel with your push. So yeah, I think that it is super ambitious. We're really, you know, aware of the scope that we're attempting to do, and we're in it for the long game. And in the end, we are building something that we would like to play ourselves, that we think is missing as fans of the genre. But at the same time, it's not like, hey, we're building something that we would like to play. There's no market research behind it. There's no data or traction. There is no, market opportunity that we have, you know, analyzed and spotted that we're going to capitalize on. So I think it's a sweet spot between those two things that needs to come together for a project like that to have some kind of breakout potential if it's good in the end, right?
Yeah, okay, so I don't know the gameplay mechanics, I don't know the gameplay loop. Maybe when you have something playable or this tech demo or whatever, you can send me. I would really like to
we can
try
send
it.
you keys right after the show. Yeah,
Nice.
it's available on Steam.
We didn't do it up front because I didn't know that you had a shareable playable.
No.
Ooh, that might sounds
Shareable
nice.
playable.
Shareable playable, yeah.
Some would say you have a rap background.
Yeah, well, some would say, and they wouldn't be wrong. Yeah. But yeah, I would really like to try because, I mean, this grand vision is baffling to me if you manage to put that in I mean, I know that I won't see all of it in tech demo, but I just want to get
The flavor,
taste. Yeah,
the taste of
flavor,
it.
just
Yeah.
to see,
Yeah.
at least to follow the progress as you move on, to see where it all started, well, tech-wise, and to see where it's gonna go, because it's We've been talking about this game. I remember when we went to your place in Novi Sad for some, food and drinks, and you were showing off the lore book, the lore guide.
Yeah.
I was like, dude, this game doesn't even exist, and you have the lore guide. I mean, it was nice. You have the images, the renders, the story bits, and it was like,
I mean, we raised.
it's nice.
I can disclose it openly. It's no big deal. Like, we're really transparent. We raised 130K off of a lore book.
There you go.
We did, and people are like, how in the world, that this happened?
Did you make the lore book? A lore book? No. Well, there you go. So go make one.
Exactly, and that's like, and they always make fun of me like, oh, you're a boomer. It's like, and you want physical stuff, and physical stuff works really well.
Well, digital stuff cannot populate all your shelves like
exactly.
I have. So
Right?
there you go. Yeah.
And actually, it was really fun. Like, the idea for the lore book came from, like, at that point I was doing another project while we were still in the Crazy Hubs with Bora, and I was making an art book for a fan project, and he came into the room and he was like, "This looks cool. Why don't you have that for your story?" And I was like, I already heard that multiple times from, like, my mentors and everyone. Everyone was like, please make something physical out of it. Don't let it just die out in a writing form.
Oh, the boomers.
Yeah. And I was
But not the boomers.
at first, it was, of course. I was like, oh, come on, do we need to make this?
I just grilled him enough so that he would actually make it.
Yeah, but at the time when you're like at the page 7, you're like, well, this is starting to look really good. And have in mind, we are no graphic designers, so just Luka Budimir and me were basically sitting and trying to make a makeshift version out of that lore book. But then when we showcased that to our angels, they were like, this has potential. Let us give it to our graphic designer, and then we can see what we can make out of it. And when they returned with, like, a finished version, we were like, damn, this looks really good.
So we modded a lore guide of a game that didn't exist.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Inception style. I mean,
It's
come
crazy.
on. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
And we've been carrying this stuff to conferences with us. And, as people sit down to play the demo and, there are bystanders watching, and, like, while you're watching, if you'd like to take a look at the lore guide, people are like, oh, lore guide. It's like, well, please do. So it's a really good conversation starter, and it shows the depth that you are planning. So yeah, it worked really well at live events as well, aside from investment.
One interesting logistical question about this, about the lore guide. So you have it printed out. Do you have multiple copies that you can, like, give away to people, for example, in Gamescom?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we usually intend, the number of meetings, or if we have a pitch event, we know the number of judges, so we plan accordingly. We print, the ones that are for giveaway.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, you
so
plan
people
on that.
have it on their desk, right? It's bothering them. It's right next to it. Like, what is this? It's like, oh, I might talk to those guys later.
A coffee table
have they been
print,
up?
basically.
Yeah.
And then especially because we have we're preparing already a different medium behind the scene about the lore, And it's a lot easier when you're talking to someone not from the gaming to like put, I don't know, World of Warcraft, and they have like a lore guide, books, and all of that. And then we put all of that on the table, and then our versions below that. And they're like, ooh, so you have something that big companies have. And it's a lot easier to basically just make a connection for them, like where the things are going and the potential if it all goes well. So they see the commitment that you don't want to do because the money is always the problem. And like making printed books and all of that, it's not a cheap endeavor. So you're always trying to like to save the money. But sometimes it's really good to do something for the players, for the people to see like, oh, because reading the text and then seeing it in a paper version and then seeing the characters and the world, it's a lot easier for people to connect with that than like, oh, let me tell you a story about
and
this character.
Soon there's going to be a small expansion into comic book. We already have comic book artists working on the first Godforged small comic story. And this came completely out of the blue. There are, a friend of mine in Novi Sad who's been doing comics and drawing for manga studios like for ages now. And we bumped into each other and like we started talking and they're like, oh, they were thinking about doing something that's connected to the gaming universe. And we told them a story that what we're building and they were like, okay, let's do a Godforged comic. Let's do an introduction story. So I'd like to give a shout out to Alyosha and Borislav, who are basically, helping us develop the first comic portion of Godforged. And yeah, we're aiming to, bring that with us to the following conferences and have, small reveals of tidbits of what it's actually going to look like when we have art books, when we have comics, already at early stage. Yeah. But it's not, dwindling our development capacity because this is like, people coming in, liking the idea and wanting to contribute. And we're finding content. Ways, user-generated content, right?
And I think that's like the best potential from the Serbia when you look at it. So when you talk about, I don't know, UK, they have like colleges for the game design. They have a whole pipeline for their people to finish the school, go into the big companies and work on the games. In Serbia, it's a bit hard to start going into the game development. But on the other hand, we saw the passion behind the people who want to work on bigger projects. So when we started this, it was just 4 of us trying to push an idea. But now we have a lot of people that are doing things pro bono, like Slaviša Repac, for example, who voiced one of the characters in the game. I mean, a lot of the characters in the game. And then you see how people react because they all want to see something big come out of the Serbia. So we know how Witcher worked wonders for like the Poland and the CDPR, how it shifted from like Poland having almost zero let's say capacity in the gaming industry, and now they are mega power and the biggest in Europe. So there's a lot of potential that people see in this project and they're like, I want to be a part of this because we have a lot of talented people doing a lot of different stuff. And then when you see them come and they want to contribute and the passion that they bring, it stirs the fire in you because it's a big project. Sometimes it's really hard to like keep the positivity or like you even think about giving up at certain points. But then when people come in and they're like passionate about your project and they're like, if they're passionate about it, I should be more passionate about it. So it's a chain effect that basically pushes you to go further and to do something that alone you wouldn't be able to do, basically.
Yeah, and all that creativity that comes from all different sides, it's not coming from the team that people think
it's
similar, but
highly diverse.
Like, exactly. Yeah.
And that's great. And I think having all of these different opinions really makes a difference in the process of creating, basically anything. And also having, international perspectives, intercultural perspectives in development is, pretty key in developing something like this. And one of the reasons why we're now doing your podcast in English basically is why I believe that since Serbia is slowly shifting and becoming a sort of a player in the gaming European market, there've been big acquisitions here. You have AAA studios opening up offices. You have a lot of big studios relocating to Serbia. Now you have a lot of, R&D tax benefits and IP benefits that make it, really competitive and stand out in terms of labor force and the tax setup that you can have here. And I think it's important to have these conversations in a language that everybody can understand. It would be cool to have stuff like, the Serbian Games Association's game report, in English as well, and to have these panels and conversations. I mean, it's becoming more and more common, and I think it's amazing. I'm a huge supporter of that. So my request for this basically was, align with that idea.
Yeah, so in 80 plus episodes of this podcast, this will be, I think, 82nd, you were the first one that asked to do this way. So, well, that says something about your approach as a studio on taking this game as far as you can. So, kudos to that. I got no problems speaking English,
Kudos
so
to
you do the most of the talking. So anyway, yeah, I'm just here to put some words a little bit, but maybe this trend should continue in the sense that maybe I should do all the episodes in English.
Who knows? Well,
because
you might expand the podcast regionally.
I have the idea about this from the get-go. Yeah. Basically, from the episode 1 to have some like Zoom calls on, video calls with other developers from around the world to talk about their projects and stuff like that. But I'm just stuck in this route going like Serbian. It's easier and it doesn't take much effort on my part to like find the people from the other studio, cold call them, or use some contacts that I have in the industry to approach somebody. I mean, it is a little bit of effort. This still is not my main thing. I do other stuff. This is like still a passion project, so it takes a lot of time to deliver everything for the podcast. But this is from the first episode idea, and maybe this could be a way to get this wider reach.
I mean, listening to your podcast pretty much regularly, I'm thinking like there are so many talented people and such quality stories and experiences that are being shared, and now it's limited to a Serbian-only audience. It's a shame, right?
It's a Balkans.
Balkans, yeah,
but
sure.
Still a small set of game development. I mean, enthusiasts and professionals.
And, it might end up playing a bigger role in, raising our industry's visibility to the next level, because you never know who's listening.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's a mutual benefit. Like, when you look at it from the perspective of, like, when you expand the market and go from, like, Balkans to the Europe and even the whole world, like, it helps the Serbian market grow as well. Because now you're expanding your audience, people are coming in, and you just increase your visibility 10 times when you do it good. And there was a big problem, especially when I started doing this. Like, there was this mentality that in Serbia you cannot do anything. It's really hard. Just give up, go do a regular job, something that's
9 to 5.
Or how a lot of people said it to me, like, get a real job.
Yeah,
you're just doing some silly writing and you won't be able to do anything of that. And we're slowly seeing a shift from that mentality, and we now have a lot of grants that were not available for indies before. When you look at like a Rising Stars grant and then Catapult, and there's so many options for people to actually get the funding to start their projects, especially if they're doing smaller projects, because they're easier to fund. And I think it's just a great idea for all of us together as an ecosystem, basically to expand and work together to showcase to the world what we can do. Because as Bora mentioned, there are a lot of talented people here. And one of the biggest things that surprised me when I worked with AAA people that were also in the modding were like, oh, we had a Serbian guy doing this, we had a Serbian guy doing that. And then you realize that there are a lot of people from Balkans all around the world already doing great work. It's just that no one talks about it. And then it appears like, oh, nothing is coming out of the Serbia to the wider audience. Us in the gaming industry, we all know each other, so we're like, oh, we know that they are doing something. But when you talk about like the casual people who are just watching on YouTube, it's not gonna pop up to them as often as it should, as I think personally it should. And that's what I think like working together to like increase the visibility of all of us together can basically help us all get to a point where we are known to the world, like, oh, look, a small Serbia is doing something great.
Yeah. But also, well, when I think about going to a conference, I mean, we all speak English. Everybody speaks English there from Serbia, from all over. So it's a common language. So doing a podcast in English, as you proposed, is a great way to talk to a publisher, a VC, an interested party in your project. You can say, when you have time, you can check out the podcast. It lasts 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever. And you'll get a lot of details from that about the project. So when you're on a treadmill or stuck in the traffic, pop the podcast up and hear the story about the game that you find maybe interesting to support or whatever.
Yeah.
It's a nice way to go about it. Yeah.
Definitely.
From now on, English only. Not talking Serbian.
Change the concept of the show.
Change the concept. Yeah. Well, speaking in Serbian, basically native tongue is much less. It has its own nuance. When we can talk about local references, get a little bit, laid back in the way we speak. But now this is like a focused effort. I mean, we're doing pretty good speaking it.
I'd like
speaking
to
it,
think so.
yeah. But it's I feel more concentrated, focused on like delivering the questions and you delivering the content.
Yeah.
And it's like it's a different vibe and I like it.
It's a different kind of packaging, and I think that's also translating back to narrative design. Basically, I see a lot of Balkan mythology and Slavic mythology games being brewed and worked on here in the Balkans.
Yeah. As we speak.
And I think that's amazing because I think it's a really niche segment that has the potential to pop out and tell amazing stories. But at the same time, I think thinking in a way how to make it presentable and how to make it sound good to people who are of English speaking origin. It's like common name Svetlana, right? We can say Sveltana, right? Flip the two.
The letters,
The letters. Flip the two letters. Make it sound more pronounceable in English. Make it sound mystical. Like you don't have to stick with the hard Serbian pronunciations with the typical names. Make a creative spin-off to them so that they would sound more natural and mystified, but also have a reference that the locals will understand, because we tend to put our culture first and in a hardcore way that maybe is too hard to grasp for people, and also hard on voice acting as well. Like it can break the immersion. Like sometimes hard accents can be great if executed properly, but I think when doing anything that's supposed to be compelling in a narrative way, you need to take extra care of those little things.
Yeah, especially when you think about like the voice actors that you're gonna bring into the story and into the game. Like they're used to English. When you add them, like, oh, now you have to do this accent. Even if it's a celebrity voice actor, they're gonna have a hard time like to focus on the accent and then give the emotions that they need as well. So making it easier for them also makes sense. And it's usually a small change. For example, we have a castle called Bezden, and it's like basically we just switched the Z to S, and then you have the same word. And to Americans and to the English-speaking part of the gaming population, they're like, oh, this just sounds cool. but the people from the Balkans are still going to be, oh, there's a reference here. And then they're going to go deeper into it. And it's also a community building in a way, because if Balkan players find the secret, they're going to tell it to the other players as well. And then they'll be like, oh, what else can we find in this world? Yeah. And
you can
people like that. Like, they want to get lost in the worlds. For example, like on the last Newzoo data, which is basically gaming analytics, we saw that people, the RPG players, especially the hardcore players, they play up to like 6 hours a day, which is amazing. And the funniest thing is, like, a lot of them are like 30 plus years old. So it's people with jobs, with kids, but they're still like, who needs sleep? I'm gonna stay up until 3 to finish Expedition 33, and I don't need that much sleep. I can sleep 4 hours and then go to the job next day.
my way, exactly. How I put 360 hours into Elden Ring.
Yeah,
that way.
Exactly, and it's amazing to see how much people love the genre and how much they love the immersive worlds. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons, like, why we see a steady growth of RPGs and the players' reception of the RPGs, like Baldur's Gate 3, Lies of P. Like, there's so many good games coming out, and you never see like, oh, there's too many of them, I don't have time to play them, because the hardcore players are gonna finish one and they're like, how about I put 300 hours into Baldur's Gate 3 now, because why not? I have the time.
You're not gonna stop. I think these games are produced at a slower pace, so within that AAA, AA range, there's not a lot of them coming out, right? And if you have, core fans that are buying 6 to 10 premium titles a year, and there are about 30 to 40 of them coming out in a year, that means automatically within that range, it puts you in the top 25% of the market just by existing. Which is insane to think about, right? That it's a pretty big niche that I don't think it's going to get exploited in the next 5 to 7 to 10 years. I don't think it's ever going to go out, personally, because RPGs are that way. It's like you're always looking for the next one. You never stop. It's, looking for the next fix, right?
Exactly. It's not something that's easily left, because it really immerses you into something else. It's not the regular world or a sports game or a shooter or whatever. So it has its magic.
But then it's hardcore to make.
Yeah, of course. But going back to my question of how long is the game? So 20 hours for the main storyline could be considered a shortish RPG. Yeah. Which, for me, is a benefit to you as developers and to players as people who are going to buy and spend time to do it.
There is a convenience in that, because basically, well, you could be our, core target group for this, basically, because
I am.
Having a family, having a full-time job, not being able to, catch up with friends to organize a raid in the evening. You want something that's convenient, easy to pick up, where pricing is not, super high, and the experience is good. You can pick it up, immerse yourself for a few hours, get out, come back to it whenever you want. That's the sort of experience that we're trying to build, right?
Yep. Nice.
And the experience is also finite. When you look at like the live service games, they don't end. If you play, I don't know, League of Legends or Marvel Rivals, for example, like, you can play it endlessly. But with the single player games, you finish one and then you're like, oh, let's go to the next one. Like movies, you don't stop watching movies altogether once you're like, oh, I finished the Dune and now I'm gonna stop watching movies altogether. You're like, okay, what's the next great movie? And having a short game is also a good starter, because you don't, like, everyone wants to make a big game. Everyone wants to make a new Baldur's Gate 3 or a Witcher 3, basically. And that's like the hype of the game development. But you also need to think about, can I actually make something as big? Because those projects are really expensive. Even when you look at like Larian Studios, they made Baldur's Gate 3 for a cheap price compared to like what other AAA studios are doing.
But basically, they reskinned
Yeah.
Divinity original 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 sin 2. So
Yeah.
it is Divinity.
Yeah, but even
it is
with
the
that,
game
yeah.
improved. It's much better than that one, and is skinned into Baldur's Gate and Forgotten Realms. But they had already their tech in place.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah,
So it's like a head start
Yeah.
plus 100 miles. You know?
Absolutely.
And even with that lean budget, it was over $100 million.
Still.
So you definitely cannot make that as a first game. And for us,
of course.
we are not even trying to do that. We're starting where Larian and CDPR started when they were starting. So making a small game that's actually good and compact. And then who knows, if the game goes well, then we can expand in the second game. And then by the time we get to the third one, we hope that we can reach that. But the general idea is to make something fun and good rather than spending resources to make something extremely big but being bland and boring in a sense, because you cannot fill it with the content to satisfy the players.
But
exactly.
by being, lean and operational and flexible, by doing so. So there are different speculations of how much, Expedition 33 cost. I think it's somewhere between 6 and 8 million, right? Which for a game that, had a strong niche, amazing design, great storytelling, and they knew exactly what they wanted to do. They didn't expect the success that they've got, but they were designing it from the get-go to hit that niche strong, with a very agile studio and a very lean methodology, picking the right partners, picking the right staff. The way that they have executed, I think, can be, a role model for a lot of indie studios moving forward, because with, AI coming in, with processes of development becoming more lean, with, the optimization, with Copilot coding, with, the ability to generate images for concept inspirations, with OpenAI helping you with documentation, with organization, speeding up. It's really important to have your status, your studio status on AI and how you're going to use it, I think, in this time and age, because everybody's doing it. There still isn't a killer AI built game out there, and the tools are being built. But, I think it's too big to ignore, and just doing stuff traditionally, the old ways, where you do everything by yourself, step by step, you take time to learn, you build everything from scratch, and not use any of the tools that are available to try and at least speed up your production. I'm not talking about using AI created assets in the game, especially within the RPG space. But I'm, using it to optimize your processes, to, do internal structures in a smart way so that your team can build better games,
in less time.
In less time, for less money.
Hopefully, yeah, of course, yeah.
It's one of the biggest differences, that we saw from smaller studios, because smaller studios usually want to, keep their creativity. They don't want the AI to do the stuff for them. But when you look at AAA, because they're big machines, they need the AI to cut the corners, they're basically thinking, oh, how can we make the games using AI? When we saw even Larian Studio CEO Sven talking about how they are using AI to cut the work, because, for example, making AI do a sample of writing, and then you have the actual writer use that and oh, how can I improve this or make it fit our game? It makes the job a lot easier, and it gives the opportunity to developers and designers to focus on what really matters by cutting the mundane work that you would do anyway. So that's one of the main differences that we have seen, because there's a lot of stories about AI and everyone is scared oh, we're gonna lose the jobs because of the AI. But it's a tool like any other, basically, and if you use it right, if you still work on your skills, improve yourself, and use AI as a tool. Like, it can help you a lot. Something similar like with engines. Like, when you remember back in the day, every company had to make their own engine.
Yeah.
And now everyone is using Unity and Unreal.
And
like,
creating your own engine was a badge of honor.
yeah.
It's my own.
Still is, I think.
Yeah, but now
yeah,
when you
of
look at it, it's a costly endeavor. And like, why would you do it when you have two amazing engines that can do everything? And then if you learn it, you can improve them on your own and make it fit your game even better. So I see AI basically as a tool to help the developers focus on what's the important, like what makes the game fun. And you just save them a lot of work from like using their energy on mundane stuff.
Right. By having that in mind, I think also there is a double-edged sword to that, because we're also seeing companies who are now openly saying, hey, we don't need junior developers anymore.
Oh,
That's one of the points I wanted to
AI
touch
is
upon.
going to
No, that's a
replace our
mistake.
junior engineers. Okay, but fast forward, 5-10 years into the future, and you don't have trained engineers that were mentored by industry seniors. And your senior developers are not going to be your senior developers forever. They're going to retire. They're going to move into consulting positions or into managerial positions, right?
Or going to cabin in the woods.
Or going to a cabin in the
Yeah.
woods, which is a, pretty
A
common
viable
theme.
solution, yeah.
So you need to think about not excluding your juniors and taking advantage of junior staff and fresh talent, but use AI to kind of make smart onboarding pipelines, to build mentorship systems that are guided and enhanced by that technology, so that they could take up the mantle of becoming a meteor and a senior, because we want the industry to survive and continue.
Yeah.
If there are no juniors being onboarded, it's who knows where it's going to go. And I think having longevity in mind as an industry, we need to be aware of those things now as these tools are being developed.
And even if you look
Yeah,
like
you said it the way I would like to say it, and you just did it instead of me, so you did it so beautifully. So because when you told me like AI and juniors, when I hear AI and juniors, I'm like getting triggered, and I was like ramping up to go into tirade about it.
I'm glad I went the right way.
Yeah, you went the right way. I was like, no, it's like, thank you for that. Yeah. So so I interrupted you, please.
Yeah, well, even when we look like Expedition 33, like when you see who developed that game, they had around like 70% of junior developers. Like one of the key things that juniors bring, like that I learned the hard way, when you're long into the development cycle, like you get used to like systems, pipelines, and you start thinking in pipelines and systems. But when a junior comes in, they bring that freshness because they're not used to that. They're like, oh, everything can happen. And it's always that critical thinking that they bring that's actually one of the biggest assets, because everyone can eventually learn to be a good developer. Like you can spend like 2 years training something and you're going to be somewhat good. Someone's going to be better than you or worse, but you can learn things. But that critical thinking that people have, AI can never basically replace. And that's, I think, one of the things that business people are forgetting, because they're only seeing like, oh, this is going to save us money. And they're forgetting like, who's their target audience? It's the players. And AI is going to make something okayish, but if you don't have a real person to direct the AI, you cannot match like what the human creativity can do.
Yeah, basically. And for example, on Steam, it is super highly disregarded if you have anything AI in your game.
Definitely.
It's a huge pushback. For example, in Heretical, we had like a placeholder icons for some prophecy cards that we have. So the idea was like to have a simple but nice representative art for each of the cards, but we just didn't have in-house illustrator, and it was like, okay, let's generate these images to be a placeholder for all of these cards, and then we put like a disclaimer on the Steam page that some AI art was used in creating the prophecy cards. And some people like noticing that it is AI art. It's small. It's not like a huge piece of screen real estate to say, but it is a small portion, but it is visible at some points. And then you have a discussion on Steam where people like, oh, these guys use AI. No, but the other come in, they say, oh, but they disclose that, and they're a super small team. They don't have in-house illustrator, and that's why they did it. And so there was like a pushback, and then a pushback on that, where people actually that play the game defended our decision and position at that point. So it's like, it's really important for players to see that it's a genuine piece of art, not like I don't know,
absolutely. I mean,
asset flip or whatever. Yeah,
depending on what it is used for and how it is used, people have it's going to be a debate forever, right?
Yeah, but it's like Photoshop, Illustrator,
absolutely. I think as long as you use it as a tool to help you get inspired when you're stuck, great.
That's awesome.
Right?
Tool, really.
But if you're trying to create original storylines, and I don't know, you use AI voice-generated characters, at the time they're maybe good for some secondary or tertiary NPCs out there to kind of fill in the world and save you some cost. But I think, having a world that is fully voice acted by people still brings a flavor, and it brings involvement, because it's not just about putting down the cost of the project. It's also about involving people and starting conversations. And I don't think a lot of people see their voice actors as agents for marketing their game as well, right? So, shout out to Slavisha and Blah Blah Media. He was the one who's doing great work here, setting up a voice acting school, teaching talent. I mean, a lot of people in Serbia speak really amazing English. And just the talent of actors here is amazing. And I think we can do a lot of that stuff locally and engage these people into gaming. And I don't think that's being utilized enough, right? So we're not going to dive into that pit hole.
Of course,
yeah.
I mean, you have to have in mind that the scams were always present. Like, we know about a lot of games went on Kickstarter, for example, raised a lot of money, and then they just disappear. And it's definitely, the AI makes that easier for them, for a lot of scammers. So we are aware that people are wary of AI, but I think it's gonna slowly change when they see examples of how AI can help the games go out faster and be better. Because when you're like, oh, instead of 3 chapters, we can now make 5, and all of the 5 chapters are actually good, I think that can change the people's opinion a lot. But still, they need to be good. If you're just like, oh, I'm going to let the AI do 2 chapters on its own, of course it's not going to match, and then you have like a big difference between the first 3 chapters and the last 2. But when the real games come out with AI usage to an extent and showcase like, oh, this is what the AI can help us make, then I think the people are slowly gonna start changing their opinion. But of course, there's always gonna be scams. Like we now see, I think Steam even made some changes about AI projects. Like it's going up and down all the time because you have a lot of games that are like, oh, we're gonna make a Steam page, we're gonna use AI to make it, and then they're starting a GoFundMe or something like that. So it's completely normal, in my opinion, for players to be wary of AI. I just think that there's also some stuff that can really help the gaming industry, like grow and go back to what it was once back in the day.
It's a creative industry, so just wanted to touch upon that point, because if a creative person uses AI to enhance their work, that will be a good work in the end. But if a non-creative, the person that wouldn't be making video games at any point in time, but they find this like a quick cash grab. So if someone like that uses AI, it will be obvious.
Definitely.
And
yeah.
so, I mean, it's like in the Photoshop. You can install the Photoshop, but if you don't know how to draw a character, it doesn't matter if you have a Photoshop or not.
Yeah.
So, I mean, creativity is still on the human side,
It has to be.
Yeah.
hopefully forever. But we'll see.
Yeah.
You wanted to say something? Sorry for interrupting, if you can remember.
Yeah, I lost track a bit.
Yeah, okay, sorry. But
It's I think it's
you will get it back, yeah.
I think it's similar to like assets from like stores. Because before like the AI, it was usually when you see like a familiar assets in the game, you're like, is this a scam? Why don't they have their own assets in the game? And the reality is a lot of indies cannot afford to have like a couple of designers to make their own assets. So they were using a lot of like Unreal and Unity store assets to make their games, especially small indie games. But at that time, the scammers were using those assets as well. So they're always going to be someone who's in trouble because of like the scammers. But I think it's always up to the players to see it for themselves, to see, oh, is this game really good, or is it just some, I don't know, asset flip and it's gonna just take my money and then disappear.
Yeah, it's like CGI in movies, because, for example, David Fincher, the guy who made Seven and so many great movies, he's famous for using CGI in movies without you noticing it's CGI. So he wants to make some complicated shots, and these you cannot put a camera through a back of a chair. But with CGI, he can do this. So the CGI is used like in 3 frames, 5 frames, 12 frames, it doesn't matter. But it's just used a little bit for him to achieve that novel movement of camera that nobody could use, because you just cannot put the camera through a solid ball.
Exactly. It's those sorts of things that are going to make all the difference in utilization.
Subtle stuff that brings the work.
Especially because, you know, AI has been in video games since the dawn of video games in some shape or form, right? But if it helps you now to create, you know, better reactions, smarter NPCs, it helps, you know, like it might go into an interesting area if being properly creatively led. But, you know, still at this point, I believe that, you know, we're monitoring all of that as a studio, and we are utilizing the tools that are at our disposal to better our work, not to generate content that we would put in game.
Of course.
Right. So, yeah.
Okay, guys, before we proceed, I just want to give you a t-shirt from Dečko Car brand. It's a graphic design studio, Braća Burazeri.
Carski.
And these guys make some quality stuff.
Hell yeah.
Thank you.
Great t-shirts with great art. So, yeah.
Gonna wear it with pride.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, yeah, moving on. One of the huge things that we talked also before we started the recording is the way you approach developing this game, being player-centric, trying to understand, does your vision intersects with expectations that players may have? So maybe can touch a little bit upon that.
It's basically something that we brought from like the modding experience, like because in modding, players are always there because you're launching with like early versions and they build the game with you. I mean, they build the mod with you together, and we have already seen that, for example, in Larian Studios, because they're always open on what they are doing. Then they give like early access, like for Baldur's Gate 3, where you have like a whole chapter to play through, but what they incorporate is the player feedback. And it's a really, really, really important thing in the development, because at the end of the game, at the end of the development, the players are the ones who are going to buy the game, rate your game, and talk about the game. And by including them early, you can basically see their reaction from the get-go, and you can have like the constant loop of feedback that you get from them, and it helps the development like go in certain direction, because what we have seen in the industry being a standard, they start testing games too late. Not all studios, of course, but majority of them start testing games too late. And by the time they begin the tests with a larger audience and they get the feedback, if it's negative, it's really hard to go back on everything you made and then start making it from scratch, because that's really expensive. And by having this player-centric approach, we go the route where we include the players from the get-go, and that helps us basically bring the game closer to what we all see as the final product.
And sorry.
Yeah,
go ahead.
sure. Go
I think
ahead.
it's the way that you construct like feedback structures and feedback loops for your game, I think is critical to kind of navigate your design, because you can't just ask, oh, did you like the game? Yeah. Did you like? You can't ask really general questions. They have to be. They have to revolve around concrete design, like, hey, how did you like the functionality of this spell? Like, would you like to see something more along the lines of this and that? And this is something that navigated our design hypothesis from the start, where we, downsized from, 9 potential classes and class blending to a lot less, but, keeping the focus more on the narrative and the origin of the class that's going to have different kind of blending, or moving from, general modular castle building to like a more sophisticated kingdom influence system that's going to be differently integrated. And you can get that only by doing qualitative research and qualitative feedback. You really want people to write what they feel about your game, and you really need to take all of that stuff into account. Not to take it bluntly, of course, you can't, take all of the feedback that you ever got and try to put everything in the game, but filter out what stands out the most and try to make smart design decisions as you go, so that you end up with an experience that fits the majority of the expectations of the people that you're making the game for, right? And that's something that we continue doing. And we're open to people signing up, like through our website. Go to tricomanstudios.com, reach out to us if you want to be part of like early testing cohorts, and we'd be glad to have you on. And we love discussing these things with players that are hardcore and that dive deep, and we really extract immense value from that.
And I mean, the easiest way to stay connected and in touch with what we're doing is to go on Steam and wishlist the game. And once we have like those tests available, we're gonna launch a news, basically a devlog on the Steam page, which you can see, check out the formula of the form. The form, and you can apply to be one of the early testers, because we really want to see how much the players get put into, because that's one of the cornerstones of the game development itself, is like the players themselves actually being influential in the games, and that's what we want to realize through our development focus, basically.
Nice. So yeah, I mean, really the project seems like enormous undertaking. I said it already. But being able to do something like that takes a lot of passion, and the passion basically comes from playing games and having some inspiration and wish and the drive to make something that you really liked by yourself and adjust it to your own preferences, basically. So what are the games that you prefer to play? What are the favorite games you like? So I don't know, pick and choose.
For me, it's always been the RPGs. Like ever since I was little, basically, I like to immerse myself. Even like playing with the toys, I was imagining stories and all of that. And the RPGs were something really unique to me, because I could just go into the world and get lost and be that and be this hero and do this and do that. So for me, it always have been the RPGs, especially like deep narrative RPGs, like, I don't know, Baldur's Gate 3, Witcher, even the old games like Dragon Age 1 and Gothic. Like all of those games were like instrumental for me in like going the route of the RPGs because I saw the potential. Because for me, like the games are the best medium to go into those worlds. Like in books, you have to use your imagination too often, and sometimes you're tired, you're sleepy, and all of that. Movies, you cannot change things. It's there, it's set in motion. But in RPGs, they put you there and then like go do something. Be whatever you want to be. Especially in games like Skyrim, for example, where you're like, oh, you're this guy, you're a prisoner, and now here is the world. Go and explore. And I just love that feeling of like freedom and the lore and the worlds that you can explore in those games. And so I am maybe a fanatic in that sense because even when we are like working like 16 hours trying to do the development updates and all of that for our game, I'm like, but Expedition came out and I have to play it. So I stay awake until 2 a.m. playing those games, and then I'm like, 4 hours of sleep, that's enough. I think I can go on that. And it's just great. For me, RPGs are the best. Yeah.
And then an occasional Marvel Rivals match recently.
Definitely.
I grew up on comics and not any, brand in particular, whether it's, Marvel or DC or superhero comics in general or like old school stuff from Europe. It's something that really shaped my thinking. So I think, my favorite game would be back at Sega Mega Drive. Like I was really into platformers. So stuff like Comic Zone, where you basically are sucked into a comic that you were writing yourself and then you fight through that storyline. Was really, some of the first experiences that I found that I'm really fond of. Then, moving into PC era with like GTA 2, with Doom 2, Wolfenstein. I played a lot of those. And then, in recent years, I've been, discovering the beauty and the depth and starting to appreciate more, the lore building and the RPG stuff. So starting off with Baldur's Gate, now I'm really, waiting to dive into Claire and Expedition 33. So yeah, and occasional Marvel Rivals matches, kind of the competitive spirit myself. So yeah, it's a mix of a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and that's what it makes like the development process special, because all of those influences, no two people in the world have the same favorite games. Many overlaps, but there will always be one that strike a chord and with you, but not with you or for myself.
Definitely.
So yeah, this mix is that's what the game development is all about. So yeah, myself, I'm a RPG head through and through. Been playing RPGs since, I don't know, Elder Scrolls Redguard and Baldur's Gate 1 and all the games that came after. And I'm also a super fan of sci-fi, so finding a cool sci-fi RPG like Mass Effect and stuff like Cyberpunk and stuff like that is like, damn, I love this stuff. Yeah, so yeah, I can understand. We can relate.
Oh,
on
definitely.
on that front. Definitely.
Let's talk more after we
we
finish this.
will. Oh, we will. Yeah, yeah. So, guys, thank you very much. It was it was a real pleasure and a novel experience talking to local people in English. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks for indulging the request.
Yeah, no problem.
And thank you for having
I
us.
welcomed it. So yeah, come on, man. It's always nice to talk about, like, I mean, I can see it in your faces, man. It's a passion project, whatever anyone might think. So yeah, I really enjoyed. We'll put all the links and information in the description so people can find the game, wishlist it, and get any information on your website or whatever there is to be found. Thank you guys once more. Enjoyed it. Good luck with the game. We will be in touch. So
Absolutely.
At any point when any milestone is reached or some super mega funding is secured, come and we can share a couple of drinks and shoot the shit, basically.
Sounds great.
Sounds delightful.
Right. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks
Until
so much.
next time, man.
Until next time.
Until next
Cheers.
time.
Cheers.